Welcome back to the show. It is Christine Jewell, and this is the Breaking Chains podcast where we are breaking free of the grind and all of these slave programs in the world to step into the extraordinary life that God has for us, a life of mental freedom, emotional freedom, financial freedom, spiritual freedom. You are created for so much more. Today, we are diving into the topic of time management, time mastery. One of the things we hear all the time, whether we're coaching or we're in these wisdom circles or we're doing live events, is people saying, man, I need more time. There's just not enough time. And we're in this relationship with time that is really one of lack, one of scarcity, one of striving and chasing. And it seems really elusive. So I love this subject. Today, I'm joined by Lissa Figgins. She is a Christian Time Stewardship Coach. And we're going to be diving into this all things time. Lissa went from running the business on a hamster wheel, trying to catch up all day because everything depended on her and she always felt behind. Hello, anybody else in life and business? I'm always feeling for behind, right? And she went from that state to putting God first and center, trusting that he would give her all the time that she needed for what he's called her to do and partner with. And I love that because that totally aligns of we have all the time we need for everything that we've been called to do. So Lissa helps Christian women, busy Christian women, juggle midlife and business and go from never enough to more than enough as they exchange managing their time as a limited resource to stewarding time as an abundant gift. Lissa, welcome.
I am so glad to be here. Thank you.
So glad that we're having this conversation from not enough to more than enough. And even in your intro there, I think about there's some isms my kids always laugh. They call them mom isms, but I'm like, I'm always telling them there's always more than enough time to do everything that matters. And they just sometimes, people hear me say that for the first time and they're rolling their eyes like, yeah, sure. Right. But tell us a little bit more about you before we really dive in. Just give us a little bit more backstory. And then obviously actually, before you do the backstory, why is this subject so critical and important that people wrap their head around?
Wow. Why? Because time affects everything. Literally every day we have 24 hours laid in front of us faithfully, right, by the Lord. And we all have a choice as to what we do with it. And what I do with Redeem Her Time coaching was actually born out of Ephesians 5:15-16 that tells us to have that intention. It says, look carefully then how you live, not as unwise, but as wise. So there are options, right? We can make choices, redeeming the time, or some versions say making the best use of the time, because these are difficult days. Amen to that, right? A lot of things are demanding or distracting our time and attention. And so, if we are not intentional about this area of our life, it affects everything. It affects our business. It affects our relationships. It affects our health. It affects our finances. It affects our well-being. It affects our faith walk. It affects everything. So it touches every single person, right?
Yeah, so true. And I believe that for many of us, time is really our master.
Yeah. You're right. We're always chasing a clock or a calendar or a checklist, trying to stay on top of it or stay ahead of it or be where we think we should be, right? I mean, how often do we do that? And
it's so good. So good.
So you're asking about my story, right?
Yes.
So
tell us a little bit of your backstory and who Lissa is.
Well, let me tell you what I learned and then I'll tell you the story, right? So the bottom line up front, right? Okay. Number one, I learned I have time. And when I was running around saying I didn't have time, that wasn't the truth. That was the lie the enemy wanted me to believe because it kept me busy and distracted. And then I wasn't of any threat, to things that he wanted to promote, right? And do anything for God's kingdom. And the second thing that I learned is that busyness is really not a calendar or a checklist issue. It's not about getting that in order. It's a heart. It's a disordered heart. And so my story, I have been married to my husband for almost 30 years. We have 3 kids now out of the nest, but at one time, my husband was active duty military. He would deploy for up to a year at a time. I had 3 kids at home that I homeschooled, plus running a business, plus serving in, ministry, and in my community and things like that. And so life was busy and I was the poster child for busyness. And I was always doing, I was always going, but I was very organized. right? Like I had the time blocks, I had the checklists, I had the plan, I had the routines, like I had all the time management pieces. And yet I was always on that hamster wheel. And I always felt like I wasn't doing enough. There wasn't enough time. I wasn't enough. I was dropping balls. Things were not being completed. That's a really frustrating place to be. I'm sure you
Yeah.
know, like your
Yeah.
listeners can, yeah, when you're just in that place and you're like, am I doing anything well?
Yeah.
Yes, I got the people from, the time they got up until the time they go to bed and nobody, like nobody got really majorly hurt, not too much blood, and then we get up and do it all over again. Well, thankfully those little kids grow up, right? They don't stay that age. But anyway, there was this, like I was always going and doing. I couldn't sit still. Literally, if it was like, time to sit down for family night, I'd have my laptop because it just felt like I needed to be productive and be doing
Yes.
something. So anyway, so in my story, I pushed past a lot of signs that I was too busy. Some of them were physical signs, being tired or just, other things that I was noticing in my body. But then there was this like nagging guilt that I was, not being the mom or the wife or the friend or the neighbor that, I could or should be and things like that. And then finally, I finally realized this. I felt like I always had a ball in my throat. And
Mm.
I remember thinking, like, that's kind of odd. I mean, at this point, I'm like well into my 40s. I certainly know how to chew my food. I'm pretty sure I'm drinking plenty of water, but maybe I'm just not. So, of course, I start there. Didn't fix anything. I just kept ignoring it. It got to the point it had been over a year. And I was like, this is kind of concerning. I'd had some thyroid issues years back. And so I started thinking, I wonder if something's growing in there. Right. So I go to a doctor. I promised my friends I will go get it checked out. So I go
Yeah.
to a doctor. They tried everything from changing my diet to which I was a health coach before I did this. So I was already healthy.
Same.
They tried medication for, acid reflux. I'm like, I don't have acid reflux, but okay, we'll try it. They tried scoping. Finally, the doctor sat me down in his office. He looked at me and he goes, Lissa, there is not a ball in your throat. I've literally put a camera down your throat. There's nothing there. He goes, but you have what's called hystericus globus. And he just like sat there with this smirk on his face. And I'm like, what's that? And he goes, globus is a globe ball. You have
Yeah.
the sensation of a ball right here, right? And hystericus, and he starts doing his finger like this, right? Like he goes, that's where they get the word hysterectomy. They thought women were going crazy in midlife. They didn't know it was hormones, right? He's like, this is literally all in your head. But I'm happy to give you a pill if you would like to that will help kind of bring that, anxiety down. And I remember sitting there and I remember like in that moment going, okay, but that's not really going to fix my problem.
Right.
It might mask it. It might make it feel like it's not there all the time, but I knew the deeper issue was in my heart
Yeah.
and my anxiety around my time and how I was always chasing that clock or that calendar or that checklist. And I was always trying to stay ahead and trying to produce more and all of that. And so I knew that that's where the answer lied. And so that was really my wake up call. I wish I could say I went home and changed everything. I didn't because I didn't know how to.
Yeah. Yeah.
But then my dad sent me a book called The Ruthless Elimination of Hurry by John Mark
I have
Comer.
it somewhere back here.
Yeah, the red one. Yeah. I'm
It is.
rereading it for the third time right now because it's
Okay.
that good, right?
Okay.
And it was just like, oh, this is a heart issue. This is a time issue. This is something that's going on in here. And I can be all organized in my planner and in everything, every other area of my life, but it's not really changing my relationship with time. And so that's where like things I finally learned kind of how to unhurry my heart and not always stay in that place, right? Where I was doing all the time. And wow, what a difference, right? In that. And then I learned how to approach time from a different perspective than how I had been approaching it.
Yeah. That's so, it's awesome. I didn't know you, first of all, love that. Did not know that about you. Secondly, it's true. When you were a health coach, I was a health coach. These things manifest in our bodies. And so many of these issues are mental, emotional, spiritual issues. And as you were talking, I've heard sometimes people say, I feel like I have a noose around my neck,
Mm-hmm.
or a thing like constricting my chest. And
Mm-hmm.
even recently at a women's retreat that I was at, some of the women, I could just tell it was like something was literally grasping their throat because their tone, it was like their voice was so constricted from so much striving.
Yeah.
And it's a real thing. And so
They say the
symptoms,
body keeps the score, right? It's
right?
like we can have all this stuff going on here and not realize it, but it's showing up
Pay
somewhere,
attention. Yeah, so good. Body Keeps the Score, great book. Ruthless Elimination of Hurry, great book. We're on the same
right?
page. So true. Jesus was not in a hurry ever. So like how, and if he's the way, so what can we
Yeah.
pick up from his book? I want to unpack this more. So let's talk about managing time. I
Mm,
mean, this is also when Mark and I do corporate training. This is like the number one thing that people always want. They like
right.
teach us time management, time
Yes.
management. And we kind of
Yes.
chuckle at this concept of trying to put a lasso around time. But let's talk about what is the difference between managing time, and we've talked about it, versus stewarding time.
I am so glad that you described it as like trying to lasso something because I do. I
Lasso
think,
oxygen.
right? I think this is what we think is going to be the magic pill, right?
Yes.
It's like if I could just be better at managing my time. I can't tell you how many times I used to say that and how often I have women tell me that. And we think that's the solution. Well, I am a teacher by background, so I always like to go look at the definition. So I was like, okay, so what does managing really mean? The definition
Mhm.
of manage, to manage something, is to control it.
Yes.
And that's why, just like you said with the lasso, what I say is time management is a myth, right? It's elusive. Like you cannot control time. It's not possible. It's not something we can actually tangibly touch. And let's be honest, like just when you think you have everything under control and you have everything lined up, right? Things pop out of place. I call it playing whack-a-mole all day long. And then you're just like literally like trying to bat down whatever just popped up that got out of line. And if any of you have ever been in a management role before, I mean, think back to like the days when you were working maybe like in a retail or like a fast food or something like that, maybe back in high school or college. And that manager, they were running around like a crazy person, trying to keep everybody in their places, doing their things. And it was literally one giant game of whack a mole trying to keep
Yeah.
everything in one place.
Yeah.
And here's the thing
So
with
true.
managing, there's a lot of responsibility on the manager. Like there's like a heaviness to it of like, I have to manage this, right? But here's the other thing about the word manage. The other way that you can use the word manage is like, I'm going to like manage to get by. I'm going to manage to do this, which means kind of like I'm settling for something.
Yeah.
And so as I started sitting with this idea before the Lord, I was like, what are we missing out on when we
Mhm.
settle for time management?
Mm. I
And
love that.
so I think the opposite of it is time stewardship. So management is my hands are closed because I don't want this thing to get away. I got to finally feel like I got it under control and I've got to keep control of it. Otherwise, I'm going to be chasing again. Right. And so I'm like
Mhm.
gripping it tightly.
Yeah.
Stewardship is I'm receiving this thing. Management is it's this limited resource. And if I don't keep it under control, it's going to get away from me. Stewardship is it keeps flowing and coming. And every day, God gives me another 24 hours and another 24 hours and another 24 hours. And, it's this abundant gift. And when my
Yeah.
hands are open like this, I'm not grasping at things, I'm receiving and then I'm giving, right? And I
Yeah.
truly believe, and I know you and I are on the same page on this, our
Yes.
business is a gift from God. First of all, I like to say this we are called to someone primarily, right? We are called into relationship with God through his son, Jesus Christ. We live that out in the context of the something and the somewheres, right? So the context of a real family relationship, whether that's marriage or parenting or taking care of aging parents or whatever, context of the faith community that we're a part of, context of,
Yeah.
our town community and the area we live in, but also the context of our business, right? And so here's where we're stewards of this time to plant in these different fields that God has given us such that it produces kingdom fruit. And almost a relief. I have women tell me all the time, like when I think about I'm stewarding time instead of having to manage it all, like there's like a it's not all on my shoulders. I mean, there is responsibility with it. Let's be honest. Like this is a privilege coupled with a responsibility, but
Yeah.
it's not
There
an
is
all on.
responsibility for sure, right?
Exactly. Yeah.
Well, let's unpack some things. And I love that analogy. And often I say, like, what are we white knuckling? As we think about those clenched fists, it's like our knuckles are white because we're grasping so hard, so tightly, clenching our jaws. It's just a really hard, twisted position to be in versus the open hands. And I love that. And it is when we close our eyes and I think about it, it's a great, open hands is a posture of worship. It's a posture of
Mhm.
praise, to our point, posture of receiving and releasing, which by the way, both receiving and releasing are really hard for those who like to control everything. It feels
Right.
really uncomfortable to receive because if you are asking for help or you're receiving, there's all this like garbage, of like, did I earn it? Should I ask for it? Like there's just so like some of us really need to work on that. And also the releasing and the fear of letting go. And what I'm really hearing though is the theme around operating from scarcity and lack. And that's what I really want to unpack more of, versus this idea, and not even an idea, it's the way of the kingdom. There is no lack in the kingdom. There's no lack of time. There's no lack of energy. There's no lack of resources. If one person's beautiful, it doesn't make one person ugly. Like it's just, if there's more beauty over here, there's more beauty in the whole. And so it's really, I believe anyways, a decision to operate and choose like the reality, the realm, the operating system that we want to operate from. But for someone who's sitting here and going, okay, Lissa, that sounds great. I have my hands open. God has put so much in my hands. I've got all these kids. I've got all their things that they need to be at, all of these activities. There's somebody that's coming to mind that I was literally having a coaching call with yesterday. There's all these business demands. We have multiple businesses. I have 6 kids. We have 2 businesses. We're merging businesses. We had 5 events last month. My daughter's in Canada. She needs me to move. My father's in Florida. He's in ICU. He's been in ICU for 21 days. And I know my story. There's a lot going on. And I was joking with Mark. I said, man, it's capacity building season. Like it's capacity building season in the Lord's house, over here, because I can just feel God stretching us. But when someone is sitting there going like, okay, I've got my hands open and there is a lot in my hands pulling on me right now. What do I do with that? What do we focus on?
Yeah.
What do
First
you say?
of all, yeah, I think that is reality, right? So many different directions I could go, right? I would say the first thing is we make time and we find time for what matters. So take, for example, the kids that we have, right? Doesn't matter how many we have. Chances are we were not sitting around twiddling our thumbs, looking for something that was going to come into our life and take over 24/7, of our time and attention and mental load, right? For the next 18 plus years. We all know it doesn't end at 18, and yet when that first baby or the second baby or the 6th baby, right, was laid in our arms, we found the time because there was value there, right? And so I think it first starts with knowing that our value doesn't come from what we're doing, but who we are in Him and our identity in Him. And then really listening and getting clear. And when I work with women on their time, we don't just jump into the planner. I have a planner coming out in a few months and it's amazing, but the first section of it doesn't even look like a calendar. The first section of it is getting into who are you? What are you called to? What does this season hold for you? Because until we know what we're truly called to, right, we're gonna have a lot of demands and distractions on our time. And it's going to be really tempting to either randomly be giving time and attention away to all these random things, not realizing it. Let's be honest, we have this device that follows us around 24/7.
Oh yeah.
The average person, as of 2024, spends 4 hours and 37 minutes a day on this. That sounds like a lot of time, but okay, maybe not so bad. If you do the math times 365 days, do you know what that adds up to? 70 days a year. 2 entire months of you not sleeping's worth of time that you gave away to this. And at the end of the year, do you really know what that was for? Right? So we have to, we have so many, we're digitally distracted. We're mentally distracted. We had this problem before. We had phones. Let's be honest. 2007 was when the iPhone came out, and that's when a lot of things shifted. But there were time issues before that, right? Here's what's so interesting. I just did a little study as part of a challenge I did recently, and I'm like, let's look at the history of time and people's relationship with it. Ever since Genesis 1:1, we've always had 24 hours in a day, so that didn't change. So why do we feel busy? Well, because we're the ones who are changing. We started measuring it on a sundial, right? Then it went to finally like a public clock, right? Then it went to the light bulb. Woo, we can now stay up past the sun. So it's not based on natural rhythms, right, of what's going on around us. Then get this. In 1960, futurists warned Congress that by 1985, the average person would only be working 22 hours a week for 27 weeks a year. And that our biggest problem in the future would be that we have too much leisure time. I'm just going to tell you that I don't think too much leisure time is our problem. Yes, we give a lot of time to these things, but most people that I talk to, especially women running a business and, life and household and things like that, fun is like the last thing on their list, right? So the time didn't go anywhere. It's us that went somewhere, right? And so we have to really pay attention to what am I giving my time to and what am I called to in this season? And here's where I think we have to be discerning. And we don't have to say yes to every request that comes our way, or every great idea, or every opportunity, or everything that we see some expert or guru or, even a coach telling us, or that kind of thing. And so we have to be discerning about what matters in this season, because when I say yes to something, I'm saying no to however many other things, right? It has a ripple effect. And we've got to take it to who I call our chairman of the board, right? I call my clients CEOs, and we've defined CEO as a Christ empowered operator of this business that God has given to us. We're the ones boots on the ground, right? That are actually doing the do, but he's the chairman of the board, and nothing happens apart from him. So that time with him, which to the world may look wasteful, like if you've got a laundry list of things to do, the worst thing that they would say to do is to get up and go sit and like just be quiet for 30 minutes, 60 minutes, whatever that looks like. And yet we know as believers that is the most productive, I say this in air quotes, time of our day, because that's where we get the wisdom and direction, and we get the discernment around what should be getting our time and attention and what shouldn't. And that's what takes us from productivity to what I have coined, and you're not going to find this if in the dictionary, purposivity. Purposivity is, yes, I'm doing things, but they all have a bigger purpose behind them. I'm not just over here checking boxes because I think I should, or because someone told me I should, or just because of that box is there, right?
Yeah.
And I'm the girl who used to I would complete a task and I would write it in my checklist just for the satisfaction of checking.
Yeah, I need to check things off.
Because it feels so good.
Okay, for the record, I have gotten rid of those big task lists. I now have a brain dump sheet that I use that I know is a living document, and I just have 3 things a day that are on my part. And I'm like, if I get these 3 things done, it's a win. If I get the one thing that the Lord directs me to do, it's a win. But it's an addiction to feeling like I'm doing, the addiction to doing. Okay, you talked about so many things I want to unpack, but because I asked you, what do you do when you have so many things in your hands? Like, it just feels like there's a lot, and that is the reality. To whom much is given, much is required. So even more wisdom, even more discernment, even more slowing down and really taking the general's view, the kingdom view over what's in our hands, and the value system. And I think you said value system, and it's like, what is the value system of heaven too, right? Like, I think that we get to remember that the value system of heaven is different than the value system of earth, right? And just as you were talking, a couple things is really, you said seasons several times. And if we think back to, again, pre the clock, I wrote about this also in my book, but it's so true. Like that invention of that sundial, right? Taking us to the 24-hour awareness of like, oh my gosh, now we've just condensed these seasons that were big and wide, because God is a God of seasons and timing and order. And we're going to unpack more around Kairos time in a minute. But you said season. What season am I in? And I think that's such an important question, because I asked someone that yesterday too. And I said, what is the season that you're in your marriage? What's the season that you're in? And that's really how I made that decision. Because there was a lot of things. I could have gone traveling to a business event with my husband. There was more things that needed to be done here to work on the business, proposal to write, go see my dad. And it was like, this is a season where I just knew that I knew like my children are at this cusp where they really just need their mom, right? They're just transitioning worlds. Like it's such a, it's just that place of going from youth into adulthood, and it's big and it's scary. And when I made the decision to go, like there was a part of me that was like, well, you should go to Florida because your dad's in the hospital and right, all this. But I'm like, Lord, you got that. You've got him, right? Like, I know that you are going to you're in that hospital room with him. I can pray. I can FaceTime. I can't be everywhere, but you can. Yeah. So I'm going to let you go be in these places while I go do the thing that I feel that I have spiritual peace about in this moment and the season that I'm in, right?
Trusting that God is going to fill in the gaps, because it doesn't all depend on us.
Yeah.
Right. And I think so often we're like, I have to do it all. Like you said, I have to be everywhere and everything to everyone. And, whether that's in, my marriage or in caring for my aging parents or my kids or my business or my ministries or whatever that is. And yet we're not omnipresent. We're not omnipotent. We're not omniscient, but we know the one who is, right?
Like, I don't have that ability yet, right?
Thank the Lord, that's not my superpower. But yet we try to multitask and we try to be, everywhere at all times and be omnipresent and things like that. And we can't. And so it's recognizing our limits and not seeing that as like a bad thing, but as a gift. You know, our limits on time, the fact that we only have 24 hours in a day is a gift, because guaranteed, how many times have we said, man, if I had an extra hour in my day, like that'd be amazing, right?
Yeah.
But I don't think it would really change our lives. It may feel good to have that extra hour. I mean, think about like daylight savings, right? So when we get that extra hour, that one day out of a year, and you're like, oh, wow, like what time is it? I feel so spacious, but you know, it really doesn't change a whole lot, right?
Just
Like
do more of what we've been doing.
we would exactly would fill our time just the same way. And so, yeah, creating that. I was just doing a study this weekend on generosity. And the person who was leading it was talking about the fact that we can't be generous if we don't have margin. And that is true of our time. That is true of our treasure. That's true of our talents. It's true of anything that we are stewarding, right? If I am so jam packed, if my time blocks look like, you know, the 405, which I've never driven on it, but I hear it's a really crazy busy highway out in California, like, yeah, one thing gets off and it's just like doom, 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 you know, like it's like, you know, this bumper to bumper. And yeah, now we've got a huge pile up. How am I like, okay, how am I creating space, you know, and how am I leaving room for God to work? And how do I have availability? So if my daughter needs something, you know, who's off at college, or my friend who called today, who's going through some major life changes and decisions and things like that, like I have that spaciousness of time. And yes, I still had the same things, you know, in front of me that, you know, needed to be done. But guess what? Like that was what needed my time, you know, in the moment. And so some of it I think comes to simplifying. And I do think I go through this process with my clients called the 4Ds to help us simplify what's on our list. Okay. So I can quickly run through them here for you.
Let's run through it.
Because this is really powerful. And the first one is the hardest. Okay. So right now, my CEOs are all working on a task list. Like we're kind of just paying attention to what we're doing, because sometimes it's all in our head. We don't realize how much it is or what, you know, exactly what's going on. So we're getting it down on paper. We can deal with it. The first D is delete. Yeah. What doesn't have to be done. And, you know, permission that just because your mom or your grandma did it, I can't tell you how many people say, well, my grandma was able to can all these. And I'm like, I'm really happy driving to the grocery store, you know, and picking up my vegetables or whatever. Like, okay. You know, or just because, you know, there's some expectation that someone else has put on us, or we feel this obligation, or the culture around us is doing this, or even people in the church are doing this, or, you know, some expert is doing this. Like, not everything has to be done. Yeah. What can you let go? What can you delete and not feel guilt and not feel like, you know, there's something that's not going to, you know, life is not going to go on, because life probably went on before that before.
Yeah. And as you're talking, I'm like, it makes me think of how many things we make up that we have to do that are just like self-induced complexity projects, work, and we create all of this anxiety around that we need to do this thing. And it's like, really, am I going to care about this a year from now? Like,
okay. So here's what it's called. I literally just said this to my husband before I walked to my office to record this. It's called a time tax, right? Yeah. You bring something into your life, whether it's a device like your phone, right? Whether it's a product you just bought at the store, whatever it is, right? And now it's not just the time it took to go to the store or to, you know, whatever, bring it in, but now it's the time it takes to use it and to keep up with it. And then the other time that it takes from you. And now this leads to me buying more things and doing more things. And now I got to fix it or clean it or whatever, you know, like, so yes, there are things that I think we have self-induced this, you know, and life went on before. I mean, you and I are of the generation that we didn't have a phone on us 24/7 and we got around. Okay. Yes, there's so many great things about having it. I don't want to go back there, but yes. So the first D is delete. What doesn't have to be done? And I'm going to challenge your listeners. Don't say, nope, it all has to be done. Nothing can go. Lie, lie, lie. Right?
Some fires need to just burn.
Exactly. Okay. The second D is delegate. So these are things that they do need to happen, but guess what? You are not the only person on the planet who can do them. Right? Like, you know, there are so many things, right? I actually was just working with one of my new clients who is a nanny, and she also helps to connect household managers with families for where like both parents are working, right? Because they want to come home and they just want to be with their kids. Yeah. Well, guess what? Like the meal prep, that could be done by somebody else. The cleaning, that could be done by somebody else. The even picking the kids up from school and getting, you know, whatever. So that way when she comes home from work or he comes home from work, they can just be a mom. You know, so there are things we can delete, and sometimes it's deleting it to another person, whether that's another person in our household, because we're not the only people who should be doing everything in our homes. Maybe it's to, someone who just has an expertise or is good at it. So maybe you have a friend you can swap something with, or like, you're really good at this, and this is like kind of challenging for me. Like, can we somehow like swap, or I'll pay you or
Yeah.
whatever. Maybe it's an assistant. Maybe it's a process or a system,
Mm-hmm.
like where we set something up that is able to kind of like take the task off of our mental load. So that's delegate. Okay.
I
It
love
has to be done.
automation. I want to pause there and be like, yes, there are so many great people. There are so many great tools now with AI to do just automation, like set it and forget it. And even as you were talking, it reminds me, I have like all of my hair appointments on repeat, even just something as simple as that, like all your routine appointments. Why are you even thinking about when you're like, that should not occupy 1 ounce of brain space, right? I
Not at
just go to
all.
my hairdresser. I'm like, put me in every 8 weeks on the clock. If anything changes, send me a text, I'm
Exactly.
like, I don't have to think about it again. It's so simple, but there's so many great tools now with AI and whatever that will just run checklists. And so I just
Yeah.
wanted to make sure we pin that, right? Because a lot of the things that we thought we had to do, there are delegation tools for.
Exactly. And here's one other little thing that ties into this. And this is something I teach my clients is like, have like your, what I call your admin day. So for me, that's Fridays. So if I am going to have a hair appointment, which I happen to have one this Friday, if I have a nail appointment, if I need to go to the doctor, if, as much of those types of things, I try to always put it on a Friday so that, like I'm not running around all week, when I want to be focusing my time on other things. And
Yeah.
so that's even just another way of like kind of delegating things to a certain day of the week, because every time that we stop a task to do something else, whether it's to drive somewhere or just to pick up our phone, it takes 20 minutes to regain focus on what we were doing. So yes, if there are ways that we can kind of, automate things or put them in, a place where it's all together, that's going to save a ton of time for sure.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So we had delete, we had delegate. The next D is delay. So here are the things that they do matter, and you probably are the person who should be doing them, but right now is not the time. It's not the season, either because something else needs that priority focus, right? Or it's just not the season for that thing. And so it's okay to say, you know what, like this is something I really want to get to, but right now this is not my priority. And so we don't just like forget it. I teach my clients in the system that I help them build out, so they don't have to live off a to-do list. Everything is living in one place, which is, makes life so easy, especially when you sit down to work. You know exactly what to do, where you left
Yeah.
off, what needs your attention. We also have a parking lot area on there, right? So that's where those ideas, and because I used to have them on random post-it notes or in bookmark, in notebooks and all over the place, and so now they all go right there. And so every so often, I've got a trigger that will take me over there and kind of check over that list. Is there anything that it is time for now? And then I'll pull it over to the present stuff. And some things, if it's sitting there long enough, I get to really evaluate, is this really something that needs to happen? Maybe not. Maybe it just gets deleted.
Yeah.
I can just release it. But that delay is really important because it's permission for not everything to matter at the same time.
Mm-hmm.
So that's a huge thing, right? And so, for example, like if you're working towards a really big event, right, you got a lot of focus going on that. And so there may be other projects that are going to wait, until after that. And that's okay, because it's better to give your, more focused attention to what is more pressing and present in the moment than to try to spread yourself so thin and nothing really get enough of you to really make any progress, right?
Mm-hmm.
The last D then is what I call the doing and delighting, right? So these are the things, it is yours. Does need to be done. It is yours to do. It is time. And it's either something that you delight in because it aligns with who you are and how God's made you, or it's leading towards, that outcome, right? So like, I get it. Like sometimes, doing the laundry again, washing the dishes again, right, isn't always delighting, but having your clothes hanging up in your closet when you need to go get dressed is really nice, or having dishes in the counter, in the cabinet so that you can pull them out and put food, on the table with the family. Like, that's something that's good as well. So yeah, so we're focusing on the doing and delighting, piece of things. And then, we're saying, okay, this is what it's time for. And that's actually one of the things that's really reshaped things in how I teach women to look at time. Because we run around asking this question: what time is it? Right. And what usually happens when you ask a question, what time is it? You're looking at your watch, you're looking at your clock, you're looking at your computer, your phone, or what's on the wall. And you're like, oh, it's later than I thought. I lost track of time. I'm not where I should be. Oh my goodness, I'm running late. It's always this like, like I have to run to catch up. So
Yeah.
here's the question. You ready? Instead of asking, what time is it? What is it time for?
Yes. I like that question.
And here's what I love about this question. It assumes two things. One, that you do have time. There is time in front of you. Okay. So it's not the scarcity, it's the abundance, right? And number two, that there's a purpose in that time.
Yes.
And then I'm able to like be present to, I'm not making a mindless choice. I'm not living by default and just kind of, letting time go out the window and all kinds of random things. I'm paying attention to what it's time for and giving that my focus.
Yeah.
And now I wouldn't recommend going like moment by moment throughout your entire week doing it that way. Like I do teach a way to plan out your week. We build out an ideal week and then we use that to do our 7-day planning each week because they're going to have, little things that change each
Yeah.
week. But it's about like knowing like right now it's time for being with my husband. And it's not time for me to be on social. It's not time for me to answer the client. It's not time for me to whatever it is, right? Or maybe it's time to be with the client. And I tell my husband or my kids, like, hey, I'm going to my office. I need to work on this. And when I'm done, then you get my full focus.
Yeah.
And yeah, there
Boundaries.
doesn't have to be the guilt in that then.
So good. I love that. What is this the time for? And what is now the time for? And that also totally ties in. We're not going to dig into it today, but just boundaries, like teaching people that it's okay to say not right now so that we can be fully present, fully engaged for one thing, which ultimately, as to tie it back to living from this place of overflow or abundance, I certainly believe, and I'm sure, you can relate, is that when we're not present and we're always in the future, we're always in the past, and we're kind of living this surface life, we feel like we're missing so much of our life. We don't remember, we don't remember the vacation we just took with our family. We don't remember the conversation we just had around the dinner table. We don't remember what was said in that meeting because we were somewhere else. And so there's a shallowness and superficiality that we are in that keeps us feeling like we're always in FOMO. I missed out. I'm behind. Versus when we say, what is it the time for now? It brings us back into this moment right here, right now, which allows us to experience the depth of it, right? And all of a sudden I feel abundant in this moment. I'm having the full experience of this moment, right? And so I thought that was a good tie-in into, this feeling of like, yeah, it's an abundance of experience too, with our kids, with our husband, with everything. So we talked about so many great tools, the 4Ds. I love that. I use that myself actually, and it has been a game changer
Mm.
in my life, especially the delete, delete, because I just was I would always catch myself like making up work, and I was like, wow, our brains really love to create problems and complexities, because I believe it's because we have this like addiction again to always needing to be in this frenetic state. So a
Mhm.
lot of these tools are awesome, but I'm guessing it comes from the decision to really choose to live from a different place, right?
Does.
And
And when you
so,
see your time as a gift to steward, like
yeah,
I said, there's that privilege, there's also the responsibility. It doesn't belong to
yeah,
me, right? If someone
yeah,
asks you to watch their kids, you really watch their kids such that you can hand them back to them, in one piece, right? If they were to be like, hey, can I park my car at your house while I'm on vacation? Or I don't know, like, whatever it is that somebody would be like, can you take care of this for me? You're going to take really good care of it because
yeah,
it's not yours, right? And so I
yeah,
think when we see our time as this abundant gift, as this thing that we are given to steward, that ultimately is not about us, for us, to us,
yeah,
that's one day, our time on this earth is going to end and it's going to be time forever, with the Lord. And we're not going to worry about a clock or a calendar or a checklist at that point, right? And so, how do we start using our time today in light of that day? And that,
mhm,
again, also affects how we use time in business. And one of the
yeah,
conversations I've been having a lot with my clients is around the ROI on our time, the return on
mhm,
investment, right? I'm not just here to put in my however many hours a week, or a day of work, but yeah, here's where you can go to your list to identify what are the things that maybe could be deleted. What's the ROI on that? Is it
yeah,
really producing fruit
yeah,
or minimal fruit? Like
yeah.
if not, then, you
Get
know,
rid of it.
get rid of it and
The
focus on the stuff
80/20
that is,
principle, right? The 80/20 principle of
right?
80% of our results come from 20% of our actions. And so it's, yeah, can we be more discerning, to your point, on the things that create the greatest ROI?
Yeah.
And can we be okay with letting go of those other things that maybe don't. And again, tying back to what you were saying earlier about having bandwidth, having space in our schedule for generosity. There's a awesome Neil Kennedy, a gentleman that I respect deeply. He's also a pastor, and anyways, he has a book called God's Currency, and he talks, I think it was in there, I might be wrong, but one of his books, he talked about this, the laws of increase. He talked about the 50% rule, that 50% of his schedule he leaves open so that he leaves room for God.
Yeah.
Right. And and again, if there's more work to be done and he's not being told to fill that with something else, but there's room, there's spaciousness for people, for God to come in, for obedience. And I think that's so important for all of us. It's like, do I want room for God to work in my life, to partner with me, or am I so busy? Like, because really that's the thing. Do you want to keep carrying the weight of the world on
Right?
your shoulders? Like, no, thank you. I don't know about you, but
Yeah, at the end of the life, what do you want people to say about you? Oh my gosh, she was busy. Like,
yeah, no, thank
that's
you.
not the legacy I want to leave, right?
No, no, no. Okay, so many good things. We talked about great tools. We talk about time management versus time stewardship. What is the ROI on your time? And I just encourage you guys, a great exercise is also to just do a time audit, right?
Mhm.
I'm sure you do that with your clients, but if you're not sure, just track your activities for a day or a week and then just ask yourself, like, what was
I
the ROI?
I equate this to when you do a food diary because
Yeah.
chances are you're going to think twice before you put it in your mouth
Yeah.
if you have to write it down.
Right.
Chances are, if you have to write down every time you pick up your phone or how much time you spent on social, you're going to think differently and make different choices, right? So, yes, paying
So true.
attention.
It's so funny that you said that, especially being a health coach. And I used to be a health coach. And I remember giving people that exercise, like, you're going to carry a food journal around this week. And oh, I eat so healthy. I eat so clean.
Uh
I'm like, okay,
huh.
well, just write it down, And then they'd come back a week later and be like, I can't believe I skipped so many meals or I had so much sugar. And it's just, we're not aware most of the time.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
so much good stuff. Okay, Lissa, tell us what you're up to. What are you up to? What are you working on now that's exciting for you? And where can people find you?
Yes. Well, my latest project is the Redeemer Time Planner, which is actually launching in November. And like I said, it's not just a planner, like it really helps get down into the heart of number one, how we view our time as a gift rather than than a limited resource. And then what is it time for in the season of life and business that we're in? And so I take you through a process of that. And then we go have the calendar parts, right? Because when we know what matters and what we're called to, that then guides where our time goes. And then I love this because I need the reminders every month, every week, every month, and every season. We're triggered to reflect, to reassess, where we are and where our time's been going and what it's time for in this next season and things like
Mm,
that. Which,
I like
because
that.
again, we can get everything all nice and neat and organized, and head off with a great plan, and who knows, head goes down, and then we look up and we're like way off in left field and go, how did I get over here? So I'm really
Mm-hmm.
excited about that being in the hands, of people and
Mm-hmm.
things like that. So the best place to find me right now, I love hanging out on the Redeem Her Time podcast, where I talk about all things related to time and faith and business. And pull together, the biblical truth with these time stewardship tools, so that way we've got, both pieces that we need. So that would be a great place to come hang out, and then from there, you're welcome to come join the Redeem Her Time community, where we don't just listen to a podcast on a Monday and say that was really great, I should do that, and then just go right into our busy lives.
Yeah.
Like, we come in and we go, okay, what came out of this episode and what am I doing with this? And we're holding each other accountable to really
Mm,
implementing the things that we're learning. So that's been a really fun
awesome.
place to hang out. So yes, and I'll be announcing all the planner details as things come out inside of both the podcast and the community.
So good. I love that idea too, with the community of just, you listen to the podcast again, you may have just inspired me to do something similar. It's a great, great, great thing. So you guys check out Lissa's podcast. I had the privilege of being on as a guest. We also had a great conversation. Time is a precious resource.
Mm.
It really is. It is such a gift from God. It is such a gift from God. And it's not one that's here. The gifts from the Lord are not here to create pressure for us. They're not here
Mm.
to stress us out. they're here for us to enjoy, to learn how to use the gifts that he gives us, to use them well, and to enjoy the fruit of the gift. So, Liz, I want to thank you for being here today and being in this conversation with me. You guys, we're going to drop the links so that you can connect with her, connect with the planner when it comes out and all of that. And if this show resonated with you, then pass it on, pay it forward, hit forward, send this to a friend, a colleague, someone else who would benefit from this conversation. And if you guys have not done so yet, I always love to have your reviews. Make sure you subscribe to the show on whatever platform you're listening to. We do read all of your reviews. I love to hear what you guys think of the show and what you want to hear more from. So thank you for being here. Thank you for being with us. Until next time, here's to loving fiercely and leading courageously. Bye for now.